Springboks won back-to-back rugby championships with a win, a workmanlike win over Argentina. We thought we spoke earlier in the week and we thought it wasn't going to be as big as Durban. Argentina would be a lot better this time, and it turned out that way as well. With me, as always, is Nick Mallett and Gavin Rich. Nick, just your thoughts on that win, workmanlike, and they did the job, although not as impressive as Durban.
No. Listen, I got that wrong. I was pretty positive that we were going to, struggle a bit in the first half, but then I thought we'd get on top of them and go away in the second. And it's extraordinary in a game how one little thing can create momentum changes. And, we had to work really hard. They scored a super first try. Obviously we had the yellow card to set us back early on. And then we fought our way back to halftime, whatever it was, 13-10. I think I can't remember the score there, but we were back in the game. And then we scored some good tries. We scored, listen, typical Springbok tries, two from Marks and two just round the corner, close little tries by Reinach. But producing that forward dominance that we spoke about that we would have before the game. And we were sitting pretty at 20, what was it, 29-13. And out of the blue, Teslin goes and throws a pass that, takes me back to the Emirates Airline Park performance by the Boks where, a Hail Mary, and I hope it hits the Springbok type of thing. And interception, they score, and suddenly they grow an extra pair of bloody arms and legs, those guys. And they got stuck into us at the end. And if a penalty hits the upright, we don't collect the ball off the post. Pressure's on us, and they finish the game with their tails up and a try. So it was a bit of a disappointing finish, but overall, fantastic performance that we managed to defend our championship crown. And also, we must remember too that all these teams are much closer together than they have been in the past. Argentina has already beaten, as Rassi said, the British and Irish Lions before they went on tour, and New Zealand and Australia. So, we managed to beat them twice, and we got our 4 wins. And the two best teams, I think, are ourselves, New Zealand, because they managed to beat Australia twice. And the other two, well done to them both for being so competitive in this competition.
Good.
I just think that Nick says he got it wrong, and I'm not so sure he got it wrong because although it was a 2-point deficit at the end, it really was more comprehensive than that. It looks like, oh Jesus, that was a squeaky win by the Boks, but the reality is they scored a try right at the end. That was a consolation try really because the game was over. And then there was that Cheslin thing. And, I would go back and something I said to you last night, Brendan, is that it's the one of the big learnings, I think, for the Boks during this rugby championship campaign. And last night, I wasn't sure if they have learnt it yet, is, look, we've got a very high risk reward approach now compared to what we used to have. So Nick mentioned that Hail Mary pass, it was from Marnie at Ellis Park at the start of the campaign, which really is actually what set the Australians up for that win. That intercept try to Suali, I think, was what put the Australians on the road to victory there. I think we were more than a score ahead still at that time. And so game management comes into it. Is when you're leading the game. It's all great to play this attacking rugby, but when you're leading the game, is it really necessary to play to still play as if you're chasing it, if you know what I'm saying, at that particular stage of the game? So to me, that was the big thing. It was almost like we were bookended. We got away with it yesterday, and we were always going to get away with it because the Springboks were that much comprehensively better than Argentina. There was never any doubt in my mind that the Boks were going to win after they'd come back and start. In fact, just before halftime, when you could see the scrum was just completely dominant, the Boks were going to win. But it's that game management issue is maybe the one thing that the Boks should be looking at, just because it happened at Ellis Park and then it happened again at the end of the competition. And there are times when maybe it is okay to sort of put away the rifle and stop shooting and to take a different approach. Sorry, it's a funny. I've seen gamers talking about rifles, but you know what I'm saying. So that was my take from the game.
Yeah.
Nick, I was going to ask you something I thought about last night. I just mentioned briefly to Gavin yesterday. I remember a conversation I had with Heineken Meyer when he was coach, and they played, I think it was England or somebody twice in a row. And we sat down for coffee, and he said to me, "You don't realize how difficult it is playing a team the second week of a 2-test series or 3-test series, because they've got so much more to prove because they've lost, and they've got so much more to work on. And the motivation so much more there for a team where if you've got a big win, obviously not that there's complacency, but there's obviously confidence. And maybe just on that, how difficult is it for the Boks? Because I mean, yeah, they are world champions, so they know how to handle pressure. But it'd just be interesting to hear your take on that. How difficult is it playing a team a second week in a row?
Yeah, listen, it is very true, and it's borne out by the fact that teams in this competition have lost the first game and then gone on to win the second game. So that happened in Australia and New Zealand and Argentina's case, and with us, we lost Australia, came back and won. So teams obviously get a big shock, and the focus is there, and the mental aspect is massive in rugby. I can't tell you. You just have to look at that. The British Lions series, us losing the first test. I mean, the pressure and the tension going into that second test, with Rusty's video, all that stuff around refereeing, and the players themselves must have been, carrying the expectation of the nations on their shoulders, and so they came out and really performed in that second test. And then they won the second test. And the third test became very competitive after that, because suddenly the British Lions thought, okay, well, geez, we've still got a chance of winning it. And so it's 100% correct. It's something that is very difficult for a coach to control. We keep on talking about processes. We're going to improve the processes. Even if you win, there's still things we can do to get better. And that is all true, but what makes the team perform is that extra 10% of butterflies in your tummy before you get out when you run out, and it's that extra yard you make to make sure that you're connected on defense, or that you're up in support on attack. You're making some bigger hits than you would if you were just a little bit more relaxed about the game. So it is very much a mental aspect, and it's been borne out in this championship.
Yeah, and wouldn't you have felt, Nick, that in a way, because it was something I was always very confident that the Boks were going to win that game, like you. We both predicted quite big wins, but then as yesterday drew on, I kept on thinking to myself of occasions. So Argentina they're the one nation. Okay, it was the Jaguars that were here way back in 1982, but it was really Argentina, and an incredible turnaround from two where
50
the
points
Boks had put 60 out past them, and then they won. Yeah. And then they came back and they won the following week in Bloemfontein. And of course, early in the competition, we saw it with the All Blacks. But also, because the All Blacks had quite a comfortable one at the beginning of the comp, and then a week later it was reversed. There's also the sort of point that the Springboks went into this game with a heck of a lot of pressure, in the sense that there was expectation. There was expectation that they were going to win comfortably. Expectation they were playing for the championship, where the Argentina went into that game basically knowing that they couldn't win the championship, and in a sense they have nothing to lose. So there's also that sort of on their side in a game like that.
No, absolutely, very true, very, very true. They're incredibly proud. We've seen the way that they performed, and perhaps too, they have this Latin temperament, but they've got a hard edge to them that they don't. I've seen French teams just chuck in the towel. They've just said, no, this is just too tough out there. We're not going to bother anymore. And I haven't ever seen this Argentina side do that. They've got tremendous pride and a tremendous courage. And they're very skillful. So they're a damn good rugby nation, and have been so for the last 10, 15 years. They're always contesting semi-finals, or often up there, quarterfinals, semi-finals of World Cups. And it's great that they are in the Rugby Championship. I mean, just on another topic, we're going into this the greatest rivalry tour next year. And I think we might only be playing once against Australia and once against Argentina. I'm not even sure if we will be playing them, but in a sense it's a pity, because this has been quite riveting this year. I've really enjoyed all the games. I've really enjoyed watching when Australia played against Argentina, whereas in the past it used to basically be South Africa trying to fight against New Zealand to win this competition. But it's been much more interesting this time around.
Nick, I was going to turning back to the game. It's maybe a topic, and I saw it, and I want to bring. I know we're talking Boks, but I saw you last
Yeah.
night at halftime talking about the hit on JJ Taron in the Bulls game.
Yeah.
It was deemed a
Yes.
yellow card, which I thought there was enough force in that hit to be a red card. But
Yeah.
looking at Kane and Moody's yellow card, which I felt was probably he was passive. It was a reflex action. It felt like a very soft yellow card as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we can just talk a bit about that first of all, and then secondly, how lucky he was because of that.
Exactly.
Not to get
Yeah.
the yellow card
Yeah.
for the attempted intercept, because we've seen so many players there with one hand, and no matter how close they are to getting it,
Yeah.
they say one hand on the ball, that means it's a deliberate knockdown. So.
No, bro, you've got spot on, Brendan. I think any head contact with force where the player accelerates into the tackle and only starts, he wasn't bent at the waist initially. He was only started bending at the waist as he came into contact, which isn't good enough because his head was still at the same level as Taron's head. I mean, that was a blow to the head on head with force, and there wasn't enough mitigation in my eyes for that to be a yellow card. I thought he should have got the red card with 20 minutes, and someone else should have come on the field in his place. But that's just my opinion. The TMA had a different opinion. If you think about what happened in Moody, they're so careful about head contact. That's why I get angry when you see something with force not getting properly sanctioned, because people are getting yellow cards where there's very little force, and yet because there is head contact, they're going to the yellow card. So it doesn't seem to be consistency between what happened in the Bulls game and what happened with Moody. And I think the ref realized that. I think he realized perhaps I overreacted there, and perhaps I'm got him off. It's to the letter of the law. I'm possibly correct in what I've done. But when he saw the same player go with one hand, well, the other hand was trying to get there, but it was definitely the left hand which knocked the ball down. I mean, that was far more a yellow card to my mind than the first one. And I just think he thought to himself, listen, perhaps I was a bit harsh with the first. I'm going to even it out by giving a penalty here and not a yellow card, because you are 100% correct. Anyone who, I mean, they've just said anything, and his palm was up, like his hand is up, but that's not irrelevant anymore. If you are stopping the ball from going to an opponent who's in a position to continue to score a try, that's called a deliberate knockdown. So I thought he was very, very lucky there not to get another yellow card, and then it would have been deemed a red card, and we would have had to get someone else onto the field. So that's my view, but it's I don't think I'm being biased from a South African point of view, because I'm being quite harsh on Moody, but I really did think in the Bulls game that guy shouldn't have stayed on the field. He should have gone off what he did.
Gav, I was going to say, you had a comment that maybe Andrea Piardi, he was so criticised after the Aussie game that maybe that might have counted as well.
Yeah, no, it might have, but I agree with Nick. I think he might well have had in the back of his mind that I'm sure a ref at some point sort of thinks to himself, hang on a minute, maybe that was a little bit harsh, and maybe he did balance it out. But he was obviously very. I mean, I'm thinking back through history. Was it the 2013 game where Bismarck was sent off?
Yeah.
Basically on the basis of the second offence, like the later yellow card. But the first one was a mistake, and maybe shouldn't have been there. So you do have that through rugby history. Sometimes we have it in football as well. Actually, I mean, I've often seen a guy get pinged for a second offence, which was probably right to be a yellow card, but there was a first offence that he got a yellow card, which was a little bit soft, and that would have been the case yesterday. And I always hate cards, to be honest. So just to change the topic slightly, if you don't mind me, Brendan. The one thing I just sort of feel that Argentina are really good at, and I'd like Nick to comment on this. If there's one area where I think Argentina are almost better than anybody in the world, and they're the one team that we don't profit from, is in the aerial game. I just thought they were outstanding yesterday. I mean, every time the ball would be put in the air, and against another team, you'd expect the Boks to get it back. And just about every time, it was Argentina. I just think that's one area of the game where they are just so outstanding.
Yeah, it's interesting how much they improved though, because in Durban we really dominated the aerial contest. So in Durban, I think we probably because a lot of our momentum came from those high kicks which were retrieved by by Hooker and by Colby, in fact, and by Kane and Moody. They were all outstanding in the air. But it was just role reversal in this game at Twickenham. I agree with you. I thought they were outstanding. The guys, they knew it was coming. There wasn't any shepherding. They gave free space to the guy under the ball, and the guys went up for that, with such intent. Normally you see a Colby win 1 or 2, or a Hooker get his hand in there and knock it back. Kane and Moody, they're all very good at it. But just they got ahead of a couple of times, of our player, of our jumper. They just got into the space quicker. And I think that made a big difference to the result, because from winning unstructured play, aerial, a kick which you do and you win that kick, it's unstructured play. They aren't in a position to defend. You've got 15 players, behind the ball, and they have only got 7 if they're lucky, maybe 5 only, who can get behind the ball. So if you win that ball quickly, you're in a great position to attack. And we've been outstanding at it. 100% they have improved, but I think we've got to realize that it was the week before we were better than them at it, and this week they were better than us at it. And going back to I still think that Colby thing was a momentum changer for us. If we just continued playing the territory, playing the contestables, keeping on going, putting them under pressure with our forwards and our pack, I think we could have scored ourselves. We could have scored another try or 2 in those last 10, 15 minutes. But because of that part, they got back into the game. An example of this was the Stormers game, funny enough, on Friday night, where they were leading. They needed a bonus point try. And they played really good rugby, really sensible rugby, keeping the opposition away from their try line. They score the 3rd try. There's 10 minutes to go, and suddenly they decide it's an opportunity to play Stormers counter-attacking rugby 5 yards from your line. They started throwing it around. They get turned over just outside the 22. Ospreys kick it into the corner, and for 5 minutes they're defending their own try line, and they're needing to be the other end of the field to score a try. So teams should realize, they should get it drummed into them that you must stick to the game pattern. The more you put the opposition under pressure in their half, the more you're likely to win turnovers, because they're going to do stupid things than by trying to run it 75, 80, 90 meters to score a try.
The thing about yesterday's game as well is that when that let's call it, we won't call it a Cheltenham brain fart, because we know what he was doing. It wasn't quite the same as the previous week. It was just a mistake, and Argentina feasted on it. But it also coincided with, I thought that yesterday was probably one of the best games I've seen Malcolm Marx play. In fact, if you ask me who the man of the match was, I understand why they gave it to Kobus Reinach, but I would have given it to Malcolm. And Malcolm actually came off at the same time, and we lost a lot of momentum with our. We almost became we made some silly errors at the end. There was some indiscipline there. I remember Bongi chipping that guy up. It was it was very nervy at the end. That was one thing that concerned me a bit.
Yes, it was, and when that team gets momentum, and Argentina decided, I thought they played really well, because they decided to hold on to the ball for as longer periods as they possibly could. To not give us the ball, because they knew how dangerous we can be with it. And their backline attack is outstanding. Their wide ruck is good. They've got physicality there. They counter-ruck hard. They were winning the aerial battle. Their forwards were fronting up, except in the scrums. So they were doing their best to avoid set pieces. And they did it very, very well. And they put us under pressure because of that. So we've got to tip our hat to their performance. It was a good performance. And yet I still think we were in a position. 29-13, I thought we'd broken their back. And it was just a question then of just hammering the nail in again, instead of playing the game that they would like us to play, which is that wide, the long pass there. Just was never. I know there were players out there. There were 3 players out there, and 1 or 2 Argentinians. But the risk of that long pass in open play is enormous. We've seen it against Australia, and now we see it here again. You've got to make sure that you keep it nice and tight. An example again, I'll say that Sasha yesterday made one sliding break through the middle, and he was looking on the outside, and he threw this huge pass, left-handed pass over Colby's head, Whereas just inside him was Reinach running the perfect scrum half line inside. He just had to square up and pass inside. So there are lots of things these guys still have to learn. When you make the break, look both sides. You don't just look on the outside, because that pass was a very difficult one, whereas the inside pass was easy. So I think we've still got, as Rassie said, there's still a lot of things to improve on. But if you can win championships with that in mind, saying we can still improve, we're in a very strong place.
Yeah, I agree there. I think the one thing, Gavin, I agreed last night that doesn't feel right about this whole rugby championship is when you look at the log and you see us on the same points as New Zealand and winning by points difference. It really, and maybe we're being a bit biased by being South African, but given the way the Springboks have won in the last couple of weeks, it certainly feels like the gulf is much bigger than just a points difference rugby championship win. And I know it goes down to the opening 2 weeks they've lost against Australia, but it certainly feels that way. I don't know if it feels the same way for you.
Well, it's that you've got to look at our games against them, both games against them. We were nervy in Eden Park. We could have beaten them. That was such an opportunity to win that game. And we just, that first opening 20 minutes where they scored 2 tries, 14-0 up. We just didn't come out of the changing rooms, in the right frame of mind, and they hung on to win. Really, it was really hanging on because we had a number of opportunities in that second half to win that game. And right at the end, the turnover by Ardie Severe is an example. So we were dominating at the end, which gave us confidence going. Then a big call by Rassie to make those changes in the back line. It's a big call. I think he'd already planned that, but to do it after a loss is very brave. And the payback was in that second half at Wellington. I mean, that was extraordinary rugby. So I think if you look at that rugby we played then against New Zealand haven't played that style of rugby against anyone. They've been battling to beat Australia, battling to beat Argentina, struggling to beat us in Eden Park. Whereas when we've got on the front foot and we've got momentum, hell, we've played some great rugby. I mean, I do think that the 50 minutes against Argentina in Durban and the second half against the All Blacks in Wellington was as good as we can possibly play. That was just fantastic. So overall, I think we're thoroughly deserved winners. The fact that they're on the same points is frustrating, but we still got our bonus point win yesterday, even though they were 2 points behind us. We still scored 4 tries, and that game that really punished us, I think, was the game against Australia. That game at Australia at Emirates Airline Park was a huge learning curve, I think, for our fly halves and for our leaders in the back line. They've got to bloody tell the fly half and the scrum half, no. Just let's get back into playing territory, get back into playing set piece to set piece. And when the momentum is on the front foot, Brendan, you've got to have a 9 and 10 who understand when the ball is front foot ball. I think the guys use the expression, when you're on top of them, you're on top of the ball, that you're going forward onto it, and they're running back. Then you must use it. Then you've got to play hard, flat on the game line with fullback passes. Space will open up. But don't force it. You cannot force it in the back line. If you come from a slow ruck ball when they're all set up, and we saw it on Saturday, how many times in their 22 did we get slow ruck ball and our big forward runners, they were getting smashed. Those guys, those Argentinians, they climbed into us in defense. And it was only in the second half that we got a bit of momentum there. So no backline tries yesterday in the sense of moving the ball around, or it was just hard work. And sometimes you got to win games like that. So I think that's what our fly-halves and our scrum-halves need to learn from this.
Actually, Brendan, doesn't that sort of beg the question, which we really should be asking as we come to the end of another rugby championship season? Last year, we won the rugby championship possibly a little bit more comfortably than this year, although it also came down to a final game against Argentina, funnily enough. But I just feel that the learnings from this year, the players that are coming through, the new angles to our game that are now starting to become more prominent, more noticeable. I mean, the Springboks were really good last year, but you wouldn't have buried New Zealand a year ago like they did playing the sort of rugby that they did. And they, although there was that really big win in Nelspruit last year against Argentina, again, that skill set we've been talking about from the forwards, there's just been, to me, what the really important, critical question, given that the Springboks are, everything's part of a process for them, they're building towards a point, is that I just think that this has been a season that has shown massive improvement. If you go back to Ellis Park, you go back to what we learned there, started off so brilliantly for 20 minutes, then there were learnings that came from it, almost repeated it in the last quarter yesterday, but didn't, and still won the game. It's just, to me, it's like there have been massive improvements this year, and the Springboks. We talk about the Springboks, and a lot of people say, "Jeepers, you really rate the Boks." And sometimes it's not so much that I rate the Boks; it's what they can become. It's what they're building towards. That's what excites me. It's their potential to actually start really perfecting their game. I mean, we're still sitting here not having seen them play an 80-minute performance in the Rugby Championship. To me, that's huge. I don't know what you guys think about that. I mean, it's just been a huge improvement.
Yeah, mate, if I come in there, I remember last year, you're 100% right. I remember Ratty jumping up and down because we beat them by 4 points, the All Blacks. And there were 2 really tight games here at time. And there was genuine disappointment that we didn't win in Eden Park. We went there with huge expectation, and that goes to show that we've taken a big step forward. Before we were jumping up and down if we beat New Zealand. Now we're pissed off if we can't beat them away from home. And that's and you're 100% right. So what moving forward? I can't wait for this Northern Hemisphere tour. Suddenly we're sitting here. They've got 5 games. Japan, I think, will be also an opportunity to blood some new players. But by the time you get to France, you get to Ireland, I think those 2 are going to be great challenges for us. And I'm hoping, I would quite like to see a little bit of rain and a bit of bad weather there, and see how we manage to adapt to that, because we know that we have the ability on the front foot on a dry day with the right type of halfbacks. We know we have the ability to get on top if we take the right decisions, even though those 2 fly halves, you can get the best out of our back line. They need to concentrate on making sure they play for the forwards as much as they play for the backs. We've still got a Pollard, and I want to see, I don't want him put on the back burner all the time. I'd like to see him have an absolutely superb game against France at Paris, engineering some really good tries and kicking his kicks over, defensively sound, leading the team from 10, because that's going to make those other 2 better, and I think that's what, we go on about how lucky we are in so many positions. I've always thought that South Africa have had fantastic rugby players, but we've sometimes lacked an equivalently fantastic coaching staff to assist those guys, because I don't like harping back, but it wasn't long ago when we took 38 points to Ireland away on one of these tours, and it's absolutely unfathomable to think that this team would ever take 38 points against. Mind you, I would have said that before the Australia game as well. Perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah.
But that Joburg game was a creaky game. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand the altitude and that it just can't. And when you're playing a different tempo to what you're used to, and they probably weren't as fit at that point and conditioned for that game as they might be now. So there was a whole lot of different things. Sorry, Brendan, you had to say something about that.
No, I was actually going to say more or less the same thing, Gav. I was going to say we spoke yesterday about we knew Russie and them had pushed them on the fitness part before that Ellis Park game. So, you sort of wonder now how much that sort of played into that as well when the legs were a bit dead in those last 20 minutes. But other than that, I think we've probably covered everything. I don't know if you guys have a last comment. I'm pretty happy. Nick, I'd like to invite you back to maybe sometime. I know we're going to again talk on the end of the year too, but I'd like to get you back maybe sometime in the week, and we can chat about winners and losers from this rugby championship, and maybe some guys who put their hands up. I think people find it quite interesting. But at the moment, there's not much to complain about. We double rugby championship winners, double World Cup winners. Things is, even though it was just 2 points, things are very good in Springbok rugby at the moment. I think it's a good place to leave it there, guys. If you guys want to make a final comment, otherwise we'll chat later.
If I just make one final comment, it's just that looking back, like what our expectations were at the start of the championship, and we all spoke a lot about how much of Australia have improved. And to me, towards the end of the competition, I was a little bit disappointed in them. And I almost went back to a previous view of them. I mean, they should have done better, I thought, in those 2 games against the All Blacks than they did. So that's the only one point I'll make. It's not a Springbok related point, but just looking back, I think New Zealand personally have problems. I do, and I think that Razor's going to save his place because there's nobody else. But I'm not sure that New Zealand are really sort of on the right track. Well, they're on the right track, but I'm not sure how much quality players they've got coming, how many quality players they've got coming through, whether they can match South Africa's depth. That would be my big concern for them. Argentina obviously have improved, and they seem to improve incrementally each year. So that's just what I would say. It's just looking. The only other thing I have to say is just looking at those other 3 teams. I was a bit sort of rough on Australia at the start, and then I apologized for it. But now looking back, I sort of think, well, they have definitely improved. There's no doubt that Australia have improved from where they were. But I think there's still quite a lot of work to do. And it's going to be interesting to see how they adapt to life after Joe Schmidt.
Yeah. No, all good from me.
Okay, well, that's great. We'll be back then again. Guys, thanks for watching. As always, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave your comments. We do read them all. So it'd be great to chat. But yeah, life's good in Springbok rugby. So for now, we'll chat again. And cheers, guys. That was great.
Thanks, Brendan.
Cheers. Thanks, Brendan.